My dear friends, and I just want to welcome you today and thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with me. My job is to give you the clearest, broadest, richest, most inspiring, and most sobering vision that I can. And your job is to listen from your deepest realization. Because the more spacious your mind, the more open your heart, the more grounded your body, the more you will be able to hear the transmission that I hope to be able to give to you about radical regeneration. So let's begin by grounding ourselves, heart, mind, soul, and body, in the ultimate truth. In the ultimate truth of the universe that is in this story. And it's an old story. And it comes from the Upanishads. And it comes from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And it's one of my favorite stories. There was a man called Bhrigu Varuni, and he was enlightened. And he had a son that he absolutely loved. And he knew that he was dying. And he wanted his son, before he left the earth, to know what he knew. So he asked his son to go up to a little hut on the top of the mountain near where they lived and meditate for a year on reality, and then come down and tell him what he had learned. So his son skipped up the mountain, sat down for a year, came down the mountain and said, "I've got it. Reality is food. Everything needs food." And Bhrigu Varuni said, "Well, that's not a bad answer, but it's not quite the answer. So you need another year up there." So the son went up and came down after the year and said, "Dad, I've got it. Everything in the universe is mind." Ooh. And Bhrigu Varuni said, "That's great. You're near, but you're not quite there. Yes, it's true that everything is a manifestation of divine consciousness. That's true. Bravo. But go back and really concentrate this time, because Daddy's dying and wants to hear from your lips that you've got it." The next year, he saw his son coming down the mountain, and his son was peaceful and radiant and smiling, and a light was glowing around him, and his father wept with happiness, and he embraced his son. And he said to his son, "I know you know, but I want to hear it from your lips. Could you please do me the honor of telling me the truth that you are now one with?" And the son pronounced these stupendous words that are the ultimate truth of reality and the ultimate transmission of all of the great enlightened teachers. And the truth is, from the great bliss, all things are born. In the great bliss, all things live, and to the great bliss, everything returns. This is the highest mystical teaching. This is the highest mystical teaching. The great bliss is not happiness. Happiness comes and goes. The great bliss is born out of a tremendous, unarguable, unshakable experience of the divine that gives you the inconquerable knowledge that everything that has ever happened and everything that is created and all of the universes in all of the realms are all created from a massive joy. They're created in joy, they're created for joy. And that joy that you connect with at the highest levels of the mystical path, that joy is the sublime radiation of all transforming and all creative love. Love is the diamond, and joy is the shining of the diamond. And why I'm beginning my transmission with that story is that I want to invite you now to connect with whatever you have experienced of that diamond of love with its radiation of joy. To remember a moment where you knew that behind all of the madness of the dance of opposites in this turbulent and tragic and terrifying world, there is the smile of the dancer, the smile on the face of Shiva Nataraja, holding in one hand the flame of destruction and in the other hand the drum of creation, and dancing this wild, holy, terrifying, amazing dance from a place of serene bliss. Why this is important is because you and I have come through the grace of the divine to the most demanding and unprecedented crisis of our whole evolutionary destiny. And this crisis is so immense, so ferocious, that we will only be able to approach it from an increasing depth of real, deep, calm, passionate, compassionate, soberly ecstatic realization. And the deepest meaning of this crisis, as you are going to see, is that it is so ferocious that it is designed with a deadly and extraordinary precision to drive us into the deathless joy within us, because that's the only place from which we will have the spaciousness of being with which to hold the two unimaginably demanding and intense opposites that are now dancing in Shiva's dance, in the great Kali dance, in the great dance of God that's happening at this moment. On the one hand, the prospect of potential extinction coming very fast. And on the other hand, the birth in human consciousness of the great secret that has been kept hidden in all of the mystical traditions, but known by a few really advanced adepts, the great secret being that humanity is destined to be born on the earth into an embodied, engoldened, empowered, co-creative, divine humanity. How will we hold those two devastating and challenging opposites that are now arising simultaneously in this tremendous death that is potentially also a tremendous birth, unless we all get very much more serious about profound mystical practice so as to be initiated into the secret of the Taittiriya Upanishad. From great bliss, all things arise. In great bliss, all things live. And to great bliss, all things return. How will we be able not just to resonate with that, not just to be inspired by that, but to know that in your illumined mind, in your awakened sacred heart, and in the increasingly divinized cells of your body irradiated by grace? It is only by taking the mystical path with a seriousness and an intensity and a focus that we have never done and hardly imagined possible, that we will find the strength, the nobility, the majesty of being, the power, the peace, the compassion, the resolute selflessness with which to hold these shattering opposites, not be paralyzed by them, but to become in the dancer, our own dancer. As Kabir said, the great Kabir, one of humanity's two great universal mystics with Rumi, as Kabir said, giving us the entire key to how the great bliss enacts our evolutionary destiny. He said this: so if I was ruling the world, which of course will happen very soon, I would write these 5 lines in letters of burning gold outside the United Nations, because they contain the key to the eruption of the great secret on a vast scale, the truth of where we could be going, the truth of what's being offered to us if only you and I are brave enough to see exactly where we are, and wild and holy and deeply dissonant enough to take on the great path to birth us into our next level of evolutionary truth. And these lines are, so please listen with your fullness of realization, with everything that you've experienced on the earth right now, because these lines will thrill you if you listen from the depth of yourself, and not just with a mind hungry for more information, but from the depth of what you, as wise people, as passionate people, as people who are spending your Sunday with someone who is living this secret and trying to transmit it to you. My father is the transcendent Godhead. My mother is the embodied Godhead, and I am their divine child, dancing for them both on their burning dance floor. Just take in the majesty of what Kabir knows that you and I really are. We have for a father the eternal shattering light, the light that can never be exhausted by any of its multiform, multiple creations on any level in any universe. The light that exploded in the Big Bang and gave birth to our cosmos. That light, that's our father. And our mother is the irradiation of that light, that is the Shakti that creates all things, every stone, every flea, every banana, every nose, every lesbian acrobat, everything, and lives in and as everything. And when you know, because you've suffered enough, and you've prayed enough, and you've hungered and thirsted for God enough, and you have sat up enough nights saying the name of God, and grace has poured torrentially down on you, when you know that you have a Father in the eternal light and a mother in the entire universe and all of the processes going on in the universe, then, oh, wonder of wonders, you are born as their conscious, exuberant, unflappable, undefeatable, irradiated, radiant, wild, free, divine child. And your whole life, everything you say, everything you think, everything you dedicate your powers to, becomes a dance for them both on their burning dance floor, the world. That's where we are going. And Kabir knew it in the 13th century. I've just spent 5 years of my life bringing the great Kabir poems together to give to you so that you can have his testimony along with all of the other great evolutionary mystics, because you're going to need it like oxygen, because the time of the great birth through the great death has come. So let me begin what I want to talk to you about, which it's already begun. How can you stop it? By reading what opens my book, The Radical Regeneration, the book that I wrote with Carolyn Baker. We both spent 2 years getting it into shape. It takes much longer to write a short book than a long book, because you have to boil everything down. And in this book, we have given the map for what we believe to be the central transformation process of our time. So I beg you, on pain of death and karmic retribution, to buy it. It will cost you precisely the price of a mediocre breakfast, $13 or $14. So you won't die in a ditch of poverty. Here is the poem with which I began the book, and it is a prayer to Kali. And as you probably can understand by now, what I am about is about introducing you to the terrifying reality, not to paralyze you, but to put a Bunsen burner up your ass to get you deeper into spiritual practice and wilder about sacred action. Because it's only through really responding to the absolutely stark reality of what's happening without any fear, but taking that starkness into the depths of yourself to make yourself finally a true spiritual seeker and sacred activist, that you can possibly participate in the great evolutionary passion of the Divine Mother to birth a new human race. Don't fool yourselves, and don't miss the greatest party ever thrown on the earth. So here is the poem, and it's a poem to Kali. Your hurricane has come, O terrible and golden one. It is here, and it will not relent until the old is annihilated and the new, the utterly unfathomably new, rises in those of us who remain, or on the earth burnt clean of our last trace. The hurricane those you seared with your scalding grace of truth and revelation knew would come, has come. The whole world is convulsed by it, as you told us it would be. Its ferocity is terrifying and astounding, as you promised. Its majesty brings even the most addicted and willful of us trembling and crying out to our knees. Its perfect precision plunges all who adore you into an abyss of awe. You had prepared me, Mother. You had driven me from death to death and to the awful loneliness of having to speak your truth to a stone-deaf time, and to the ecstasy only you can give, the ecstasy that is the explosion of your fire in the mind, the heart, the cells of the body that have waited since the first amoeba for your devastating kiss. What words could ever express this gratitude? Your crucified and resurrected lovers know. There is no refuge from you, but in you. No sanctuary from this storm, but in its vast calm eye. No true life, but in the dying into life, to become your servant of truth, your slave of sacred action, your child playing with your necklace of skulls in the middle of the abattoir, your eagle flying straight and unswerving through your dance of lightning, your voice rising from the final silence that is all that is left when your hurricane passes, the dust that turns to gold on your bloody, pounding feet. I ask and beg in your name that you give us all the strength to bear the unbearable, the courage to endure the unendurable, the energy to keep giving all we are and have in your honor and for your glory, however dreadful your dance becomes, the fabulous extravagance of your creativity that rises from the ashes of our brilliance, the passion of surrender to submit to your engoldening transfiguration, however brutal the agonies and breakdowns that must prepare us for it. Your hurricane has come. Grace us the vision in this desolation, Mother, of what it engenders: a new creation, a mutation, a birth so staggering in its beauty and power that there are no words glorious enough yet to begin to describe it. For what are words to your lightning word? And what are the dreams of even the most illumined of your servants to the dream you will make real, if enough of us go on giving everything and more than everything and more than everything to realize it. In 2008, I attended the conference at Copenhagen and addressed the UN. And after that terrible conference, I realized that the world was in terminal danger because no one was doing anything real about the collapse of the climate. And facing the world leaders and seeing their dereliction of any kind of duty, their passivity, their paralysis, their corruption, and their unspeakable unwillingness to come together to solve the crisis that is now threatening the whole human race drove me deep into despair. And I went to India, and I went to Benares, where I go when I need to be myself regenerated, because it is the maddest and wildest and most frightening and most joyful place on earth. And I feel at last I'm in a place as crazy as my real mind. And that is always a huge relief, to be taken out of the sterile little box in which we're forced to live in the earth, and to wake up in the morning to the sound of sadhus chanting the name of God, and to go in the evening and see beautiful young men dressed in cloth of gold who offer the entire universe again and again and again and again to Shiva and the mother, and to sit at 2 o'clock in the morning with the naked sadhus watching the bodies burning and participating in the great dance of death and rebirth. And this time I was very lucky, because through a great connection that I have in Benares, I was allowed to meet one of the living secret legends of Benares, a very old woman who was, she has left now, the most respected Kali mystic in India. She very rarely saw Westerners, but she saw me. And this is what she told me. And I am going to tell it to you because we're now living it. She told me this. She said, Kali Yuga is going this time very much faster than it has ever gone before, because of the madness and hubris of humanity. And there are 4 stages of Kali Yuga. And I'm going to read you, because I took down the notes immediately, about what these 4 stages are. Oh, it's so exciting. Let me try and find it. And if I can't find it, I'll remember it. The first stage is the stage that happened in the industrial civilization, when we really became industrial and started to go on this mad orgy of domination of nature. Marx cried out. The great romantic poets cried out. We didn't listen. The second stage erupted in the 1960s, when again there was a chance, as the terrible news about the environment came in at the end of the 60s, to do something real. And as it was becoming more and more clear that capitalism, although it had certain successes, was creating an unbelievable, sterile, sacred desert, again, we didn't listen. And the third stage is where we are now. And this is the severe stage, when Kali's crises are going to erupt more and more and more and more and more and more devastatingly, because she is trying to shake the whole of humanity awake, to come together and transform itself so as to co-create a new world. And if this severe stage, which we are now at the end of, and which has now erupted in 5 overwhelming interconnected crises, the crisis of the pandemic, the crisis of a collapsing climate, the crisis of 1 million species standing on the brink of extinction, the bees going, the tigers going, the lions going, the elephants going, nature in a vast Auschwitz being tortured to death by our greed. The 4th crisis, a crisis of massive inequality, in which in the pandemic, the 250 billionaires made $2 trillion more, while millions of people lost their jobs and had to go on to food lines, and the whole world is facing economic crisis and a crisis of what Paul Levy calls wetiko, a great soul crisis, a crisis of paralysis, denial, mad magical thinking. And all of those crises are now erupting in the severe stage as her last call to us. And if this crisis is not dealt with from the depths of ourselves, I can never forget her face as she said this. If this crisis is not dealt with, if we don't transform ourselves, then the lethal stage will begin and Kali will dance her dance of total destruction. And the human race will be wiped out and take with it a great deal of nature. She was sitting in a dirty little quiet room with an image of Kali and a candle. And after she'd said that, I knew that I was being told an ancient, terrible, absolutely inescapable truth. But I also knew that there was more to come. I felt it. And she was watching me. And I wasn't shaken. I was totally destroyed, but I wasn't shaken. My vanity was destroyed. My false hope was destroyed. My illusions were destroyed. But the I am that lives in me as me was not destroyed. And I was sitting there facing her. And then she said something which I really would love to communicate to you in its joy and possibility. But a joy and a possibility that you and I will have to enact. This joy and this possibility are not given to us as yet another thing to indulge our fantasies with. This joy and this possibility are given to us as an immense and glorious challenge to enact them. This is not a time to have hope. This is a time to be hope, because hope isn't a noun. It's a verb with its sleeves rolled up. And the great transformation is not something that God is just going to do because God feels like it. It's something that we are going to have to work with God, co-create with God, and do everything to be able to embody it. And this is what she said on that amazing night. She said, but there are two versions of how the dance goes. There are two versions. The ancient Orthodox version is that Kali dances and the world is destroyed. That's the ancient version. But there is another version just as ancient. And this is the version I am gambling my life and your life on. And that is that as the dance gets more and more terrible, more and more explosive, more and more intractable, more and more ferocious, so a massive grace descends to give the power and the vision and the energy and the passion and the truth to birth a wholly new kind of humanity, an embodied divine humanity. So just as the death becomes more extreme, so the possibilities of this unimaginably beautiful holy birth begins to irradiate us. And that amazing transmission from her has been the foundation of everything I have done since. And I stood outside the house where I'd received this, and I remembered two extraordinary conversations that I'd had in the last 20 years before that which suddenly made complete sense. Sense beyond sense, which I want to share with you. Because on the real mystical path, I'm not speaking to you of things I read in books. I've read a lot of books and I've written a lot of books. I'm speaking to you of truths that came to me through enlightened beings and through realization. The first great conversation was with my soul father, who was the greatest Christian mystic of the 20th century with Thomas Merton, and his name was Father Bede Griffiths. And I had the honor to meet him at the end of his life when he was absolutely luminous and resplendent. And he was a great mystic, he was a great prophet, and he was a sublime and beautiful and humble and very, very tender human being who'd been through the fires of a very great transformation. And I was invited to make a film about his life. And with a group of wild Australians, we made the film, and it's available. It's called A Human Search. And I went to see him on the last day of filming before the film crew arrived. And I went into his small hut. And he looked up at me and he said, "You know, Andrew, the hour of God has come. The hour of God has come." He said that very, as if he was saying, "Isn't it a lovely day outside?" Very matter of fact. And because I was trained at Oxford and asked to become snotty and questioning, you know, in Oxford, they train you to ask bitchy questions to rile people. And that's something that I was very skilled at as a young man. So thank God I did. I said to him, "What do you mean by the hour of God?" Rather like that. And he smiled because he's English, he knew the game. And he gave me this transmission, which you will see is the exact transmission that the woman in Benares gave me, but from the point of view of another tradition that also has this great secret at its heart. He said, "Andrew, we have come to the moment when we will have to decide between adoration and suicide. We will have to decide whether we are truly, as all the great mystics of all the traditions have known, children of the light and imbued with divine consciousness as original blessing, or whether we are simply lonely, weird beings in a random universe which can only be dealt with by ever greater fanaticism of greed and possessiveness and hubris. We will have to decide, and everything depends upon our decision. And everything is going to be decided within the next 25 years. And he was speaking in 1993. And then he said, humanity has now three options, I believe. The first option is to look around and see just how devastating things really are. And they were devastating then, but my God, they're much more devastating now. He said, to see how things really are, it is to truly, truly fall on your knees and beg for transformation. He said, that's not going to happen. The human race is not going to do that. The second thing would be to just continue in the way that we're doing, like an addicted drug addict, and die of our addiction and take a great deal of nature with us. And that looks more and more likely. And then he smiled. And I wish I could give you that smile. And then he said, but that isn't what I believe is going to happen. I believe that what humanity is going to go through soon is a massive and crushing and extremely painful dark night, just as he himself had been 3 years earlier. but that this dark night, although it will look like the end, will not be the end if we can align with its true secret laws. And if we can align with those true secret laws, then this dark night will turn out to be the birth canal, the convulsive birth canal of a new, unified, harmonious, compassionate, just, humble, co-creative humanity. And then he said something that blew the top of my head off, which came from the depth of his own mystical experience and from the depth of the secret Christian mystical tradition that has always kept this great secret that I shared with you alive. This great secret at the core of oneness, because oneness isn't just oneness in consciousness, it's oneness in mind, heart, and in body. He said, look, Andrew, the second coming of the Christ is not going to be the return of some avatar. Jesus has already done his job. In the resurrection, he seeded the entire universe with the possibility of the transfiguration of matter into light matter. He's done his work. The second coming could be, if human beings used in the deepest sense this tragic dark night that's coming, to allow it to break them open to infinite possibility, the second coming will not be the return of Jesus, but will be the rising of the Christ consciousness, of the love consciousness in millions and millions of beings who will, purified by extremity and tragedy, suddenly be born into a whole new level of evolutionary truth. The next day, and this was so extraordinary, and this too is what has fueled my whole journey. The next day, I persuaded him to go to his little hut in the middle of these golden fields in South India where he lived, 50 miles from where I was born. And I asked him a question as he lay back on his old rotting cot with the vine leaves falling in the sun behind him. I said to him, what's really going on in you? Because I know from having spent these days with you and listening to you that you're not speaking just from your mind. You're speaking from your living experience of expanding oneness. You're speaking from a truth that is alive in you. So please, please tell me. And the conversation exists on film, and it's something that has never been filmed, I don't think, before. It's so extraordinary. And what he said to me was this. He said, 3 years ago, at 83, I was on my balcony, this little balcony outside his hut, and suddenly I had a terrible heart attack. It came from the left and it shattered me. And for 3 days, I was in great agony and I was taken to the edge of death. And I knew that I was dying and that there was an immense force that was going to have its way with me. So I prepared myself for death by saying the prayers to the Virgin and to the angels. And then he smiled again, but it wasn't death that came. What happened is that an immense electric power of love invaded me in a way that I had never experienced before. And all I could do was cry out, I am being invaded by love. I am being invaded by love. And he was healed. And then he said, but something absolutely astounding started to happen out of that invasion by love. And it was a completely different process from anything that I had been through before. It was a descending power of light, just as Aurobindo described in his philosophy, this supramental light of the mother. And it entered and keeps entering through my Sahasrara, and it is divinizing my mind, and it's opening my throat, and it's expanding my heart, and it has entered into my sex region and into my cells and into my bones, and it is having its transfiguring way with me. And then he said, this is the secret at the heart of the resurrection. That explosion in the resurrection of light matter that Jesus manifested after the crucifixion seeded this transfiguration process that many Christian saints have also experienced in the secret tradition, but that he was now with immense awe and immense humility living. And that, as you can imagine, I was 42 sitting with this man telling me the secret of the next level of evolutionary change, the one that you and I are now in the middle of. And as I stood outside that door in Benares, that transmission came back to me and came into me, and I remembered the single greatest mystical experience that I've had on this planet, as far as a revelation is concerned. And it happened in India. It happened in 2000, and it happened in a place called Arunachala, which is the sacred mountain of Shiva. It's not a mountain, they say. It's actually the descended fire lingam of Shiva. And it is the center of the mystical world of India. And all the great sages and mystics for 2,000 years of that whole area and all Shaivites have gone either to live in its caves and be enlightened like Ramana Maharshi, or to die there and be one of the wild holy figures that surround the mountain. And it's said that if you go on the pradakshina, on the pilgrimage around the mountain, Shiva will give you liberation. And I just had a week before an experience in Mahabalipuram of the dance of Shiva that was extremely ecstatic and very, I thought, very final for me. And I wanted to go and thank him, thank that world. These are all names, Shiva, Kali, but there's only one with many names. And I started to walk around the mountain at night. And I was saying the mantra, Om Namah Shivaya. And I was in a state of great bliss. But out of the shadows started coming people in terrible shape. Poor people crying, women, old women who didn't have the money for their tuberculosis, young men who had lost their jobs because they'd been attacked, horrible, horrible suffering, beggars with no legs. And they came and they started to claw at me. And I became, with one part of myself, completely terrified because it's so overwhelming to be overwhelmed by that tsunami of pain that is also India. But one side also was realizing that I was being shown the abyss. I was being shown the horror, and that I would have to stay as calm as possible because Shiva was doing this. And it became more and more intense until I came to a crossroads, and there was an epileptic that had been strapped to a board, and the epileptic was screaming. And something happened at that moment, and I don't know whether there are words to describe it. What happened to me was that I completely lost my mind. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was. I was calm, but absolutely shot. And I was wandering in the broken rocks near the road, And my feet were bleeding because I'd taken my sandals off. And this old, sweet man came up to me and he said, "You must not go on. Shiva has struck you down. You must go home now. I will take you." And I said to him, "I don't know where home is. I don't know where I am." He said, "Don't worry," he said. "We'll go to every hotel. There are only 2 in those days. And we'll find where you are. And we'll find out your name. You'll be fine. You just have to go and be quiet in your room until you get a sign that you can come out." So we found the hotel and I went into my room, and there were 3 tremendous days that followed. And on the first day, I lived through everything I've lived through in this life. The pain and the heartbreak and the betrayals and the madness and the spiritual search. And it was an extraordinary experience because I understood why everything had happened in the way that it had. It was a way of, it was rather like crossing over death. On the second day, and this was the truly terrifying day, I was shown a film, and it was literally a film. And it was a film of all the multiple catastrophes, many of which have come, but a lot of which are to come. And they went on and on and on and on and on for about 6 or 7 hours. And at the end of those 6 or 7 hours, I was ash. And all that I could do was to cry out again and again and again and again, "Om Namah Shivaya, please God, help us. Please God, help us. Help us. We are so far gone, so deluded." And I fell asleep, completely and totally ravaged and exhausted. And I woke up that next morning and I was in a state of great peace and great joy because I could see that over the whole world had fallen a kind of pink gold light, a light that I recognized as a light of birth. Something unimaginable and holy and beautiful had emerged through the mystery of divine grace out of what looked like total destruction. So as I sat outside the house of that woman in Benares, these experiences came back to me. And I realized that my work now was to help people get into connection with the great birthing power that was doing this great death, not to destroy us, but to transfigure us, not to annihilate the human race, but to end one kind of separate human consciousness and to create a crucible, a furnace in which could be forged, if we do the work, a wholly new level of embodied divinity. And I'm going to end with a story and a poem. I'm not talking, somebody said, I'm not talking to your head. I'm talking, this is revelation for me, and I'm sharing this revelation with you. But it's a revelation that is not mine alone. If you really plunge, as I've plunged for 30 years, into the heart of the world's great mystical traditions, you'll find this revelation at the secret core of all of them. It was this revelation that the Shaivite mystics worshipped in the Golden Shiva in the center of South India. It was this revelation that inspired the great work of Aurobindo and the Mother. It's this revelation that burns at the core of the Kabbalah. It's this revelation that the Dalai Lama gave 300 of us in secret teachings 3 years ago in Australia from the depths of the Vajrayana tradition. It's this revelation of that new level of divine humanity that is at the key in the core of Taoist alchemy. It's this revelation that's at the core of the Christian mystical tradition, and the time for its sharing has come, which is why we wrote Radical Regeneration for you, which is the path, the map for enacting this. So first, the story. And the story is taken from evolutionary science, because one of the things that I've learned on this journey is that reality is God, and that if you look at nature deeply, you will be given very clear maps of how reality works on every level. They're all mirroring each other. So when we talk about evolution in this mystical sense of a new divine embodied humanity, it's good to look at how evolution actually works from the highest levels of evolutionary science. And Stephen Jay Gould made the point, which is extremely important for us to understand, I think, that evolution doesn't work in gradual, sweet, harmonious ways. When a species is called to adapt, it is given a terrifying crisis, which either threatens it with annihilation or with an immense journey of adaptation. And there's a wonderful example he gives, and that is of the fish who millions of years ago escaped a toxic sea, a sea that was becoming more and more poisonous. And they jumped out of that sea into a wholly new dimension, onto the burning sand of the shore in a completely unfamiliar dimension for which they were not evolved. And thousands, hundreds of thousands of them died, but others worked with the fullness of the life force within them and struggled overwhelmingly. And guess what? Those fish who escaped that toxic sea onto that new shore in that new dimension, eventually through their titanic struggles, evolved the organs of birds and became birds. Birds come from fish. Isn't that astounding? That's where we are, where the burning, where the fish gasping in the new mother air that's trying to compel us to adapt into a new humanity. And this poem that I want to end with, and no, I am not celebrating duality. Are you kidding me? This is oneness in action that I'm talking about. This is a poem by Rumi, one of the great mystics of oneness, but who knew this process as part of oneness's increasing experience of itself in and through us. He wrote this, and it has the key to how you and I can get through this overwhelming experience. So, the grapes of my body can only become wine after the winemaker tramples me. I surrender my body like grapes to his trampling, so my inmost heart can blaze and dance with joy. And although the grapes go on sobbing blood and screaming, I cannot bear any more anguish. I cannot bear any more cruelty. The trampler stuffs cotton in his ears and says, "It is I who am the master of this work. And I am not working in ignorance. You can deny me if you want. But when through my passion you reach perfection, you will never be done praising my name. The key, I believe, is to surrender to this process and to work at the core of oneself with mystical adoration of the One, so that the One can one us more and more completely in mind, heart, soul, and body, and birth us through this death into an amazing, new, embodied, divine life together. So that coming together in the astonishment of that discovery as a unified human race in the unified field of the Father, Mother, we can co-create with God a wholly new way of being and doing everything, and a wholly new world. So, thank you. Let's have a 3 or 4 minutes of silence, and then I'd be really happy to take questions, but don't make them mental questions. This is not a mental exercise. And I am not speaking about duality here, because I'm speaking about the One, and the One has opposites within it that interconnect and dance. So please let's get into all of that. Just see the fullness of what I've been trying to communicate to you. And I'm going to go and get a glass of water, and I'll be back with you in 2 minutes. I look forward to it. Hello, everybody. I'm ready if you are, so please jump in, and I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, I would love to jump in.
Thank you.
I would love to say
thank
you. I am Deborah Haviland.
Deborah, how are you? How lovely to see your face. What a beautiful face to have the first to look at. You're lovely.
And I feel you. And, you know, I'm from New England, and my dad was from Harvard and intelligent in this same way.
Brainy. Huh?
Yeah, brainy in intelligentsia. And then I've been on the spiritual path my whole life. And my mom studied comparative world religions at Smith and Harvard. So everything you say makes sense. It's everything I've been studying. I'm just so grateful to hear it so eloquently expressed with such passionate truth. And I'm a dancer too. I've been performing, you know, so I'm in
dance is such a key, isn't it?
It's such a key. It's such a key.
The only image I have of God, and well, I have other kinds of images, but the image at the core of my world, my little condo, is Shiva the dancer, because I love God as dancer. I feel that the oneness dances, and it dances with the dark and the light and the dark. It dances with both to create its wild evolutionary alchemy. That's the great secret.
Yes.
And if you can stay in the fundamental consciousness of oneness, the bliss consciousness, the sober, steady, grounded consciousness, then you don't need to be terrified by the extremity of the destruction, because you know that once Shiva gets dancing like that, or the divine gets dancing like that, it's because it's destroying to create, it's crucifying to resurrect, it's killing to rebirth.
Yeah.
That happens in one's own life, that happens in the higher stages of the mystical path, when you do go through a great death, a real dark night. But it isn't the end of the path, it's just the beginning of a wholly new, completely extraordinary path where you are much more in tune and aligned to the full divinity of what you really are. That's what's happening in the world. The world is going through what mystics at the high level go through, a death into an amazing new life. It's a very dangerous process. And we could screw it up totally, because there are two forces on the planet at the moment. Because on the one hand, there are people who are waking up in awe and trembling to the majesty of this process, which don't usually include the New Age, who are trying to deny that anything at all is going on and that everything is love and light, which, God bless them, may achieve enlightenment. And on the other hand, you're having people who are terrified by this process and are retreating into the old paradigm and pouring out all kinds of dark, mad behavior, which is very dangerous and could destroy the birth. That's why it's so important to become inspired by the birth and to start working inwardly and outwardly for it, because it all depends on us. Those fish on the burning sand didn't just sit in the lotus position thinking, oh, well, I'm going to become a bird. They didn't know they were going to become birds. They struggled, they hungered, they thirsted, they worked, they gasped, they took their suffocation as a tremendous challenge to develop new ways of breathing.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes, it like perseverance furthers, and yeah, I've gone through the death and the rebirth and the death and the oh my God and the dark night of the soul.
Yes,
but to persevere, and I'm in the Sufis, because I've worked with many different, you know, transcendental meditation and Sufism and this and that, and they say die before you die. The ego must die to go through this birth, and you know, it can be excruciating, but yes, I'm just so grateful that you put it in this whole, the way you've synthesized it and your passion and the way it's coming forth. I am so grateful. I just want to work with you in any way I can.
Well, please do read the book, because I've given you a taste, but the book is a very sober map of the process, including
I will order it immediately. Yeah, I'll order it immediately. And a Sufi master I worked with, Sidi Al Jamal, mapped out like the 28 stations of the heart. And it's like this, at this certain point where my teacher said I am, it's very dangerous because you can fall, but you got to keep going. And so you just got to keep going, and that we are here to serve
You've got to keep
and to be
dying.
guided.
You've got to keep dying in adoration into the one.
Yes.
That's the way. It's keeping going isn't really the right word, because it's not you who's keeping going. You've got to commit yourself through mystical practice
Yes.
to die more and more into the unimaginable fullness of what you essentially are, and to discover what the Upanishads say when they say you are that. That is the entire enchilada. That is oneness blazing. That's what mystical practice is about. It's about learning how to die in love into love.
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm doing the beads in the middle of the night. I'm doing hours of this and that. I'm doing, but I hear you, to die into the love, to keep.
But not just that, you see, this is the key. This is what's so difficult about our situation, Deborah, is that we're asked to do three things which are almost impossible for a human being. But we can do it with God's help. The first is that we've got to feel the depth of the death. We can't pretend this global dark night isn't happening. It is happening. And actually, it's the way through it is the way through it, by feeling it, by allowing it to blast our fantasies, to destroy our magical thinking, to rubble our illusions, to terrify us into far, far deeper search for what cannot be shaken, what cannot die, what cannot. That's what it's for. So if you pretend it's not going on or have magical thinking about it, you'll miss its great gift. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to really become aware of the great secret at the core of the traditions, this evolutionary secret, and realize that the aim of the path isn't simply to become one with the one. That's a very important first stage. The aim of the evolutionary path is to be oned into the one, to be one in mind, one in heart, and one in the increasingly divinized body. This is something that has been hidden. And this requires a tremendous passion for the mother, for the embodied Godhead, the radiation of creativity of the one. That's the key. And that's the key that Aurobindo knew, and Bede knew, and Jean Gebser knew, and the great evolutionary mystics have all known, that it's her gift, this birth. And the third thing that we're all being challenged to do, which is driving me crazy because people are still so paralyzed, is that we're being asked to act.
Yeah.
We're being asked to step out and risk our comfort zones and start acting to preserve democracy in America, to actually reverse the cold structures of evil that are killing the climate, to say no to the slaughter of the animals, to stand up for women and gay people and trans people, to really put our mouth, our life, our resources where our vision is. We simply can't just have this vision. We have to be this vision acting. So we have to combine profound feeling of the whole depth of the dark night, the burning in the dark night. We have to align with the truth of evolutionary mysticism, start doing the practices and realizing that we're being engoldened and born. And we have to act all at the same time with the fullness of our whole self, because that's how the birth will take place. By our full cooperation as fully human and fully divine, in full commitment to being hope walking, to being a midwife warrior of the new world. And that is what so many people are not doing. Right. They're not doing either the opening to the dark night and the depth of mystical practice. They haven't yet come to alignment with the evolutionary plan of the one, and they're waiting for everybody else to act without acting themselves. And that's why I'm so fierce about this, because I know that if we continue like that, we're going to die out. But if we bring those three forces together inside ourselves, we can collaborate with the divine evolutionary force and be born into a new humanity. And nobody knows the end of this journey because we're making it right now.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm on with you.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Andrew, I'd love to just share for a moment.
Yes.
And just, you are providing us with such a transmission of your life, of your journey. The stories, the profound experiences that have seared into your brain, seared into your being. And I just invite all of us to do whatever we can to receive it as a transmission that then our own body, our own consciousness will distill however it may be.
Right.
And
remember your own experiences too, because I don't share my experiences to boast about my experiences. I share them to encourage you to remember your tremendous flashes of insight, your moments when you were invigorated by a wholly new energy, your memories of profound union.
Yes. So I'll just share with one example of that for me. I love I am affirmations. That's kind of when I'm wanting to manifest a new part of myself or get back in alignment, you know, I am a clear channel for spirit to flow through or whatever it might be. And what I've taken from what you just said was my new affirmation: I am hope walking. I am hope walking. What a beautiful invitation. So I want to thank you.
And very difficult.
Yeah.
It's because you have to be it. And if you really are going through what we're going through together right now on the planet, every day will be a challenge, because every day you'll see and feel something new. The people being killed in Myanmar, the report that came out yesterday about the current slowing in the Atlantic, which is a complete catastrophe as far as the climate is concerned and could set all kinds of feedback loops in action. Every day will challenge you to go into the absolute naked core of your oneness with the one, to radiate hope. And you'll have to be hope walking, you'll have to be realized. That's the there's no way out.
Yeah.
Once you've made that affirmation, you're going to have to do the sometimes bloody and grueling work to sustain that radiant presence.
Yes. Which, as you said before, does include being present to the suffering. You know, really not ignoring the suffering.
Are you kidding me? Yes.
You know, like Siddhartha, when he became the Buddha, there is suffering. And really being present to the suffering, I think is, again,
without being present to the suffering, you're using your mystical path as a form of heroin to drug you from the pain of the world, instead of taking that pain in and working at the depths of yourself to be healing, hope, walking.
May I interject?
Please.
Hi, so I'm Alexandra. And
hello.
Scott, awesome. Hello, Scott, awesome. Andrew, awesome. The I Am Hope Walking, I really like, Scott, because I hear your story, Andrew, and it made so many connections of all the divine things that have been happening. Even my cat, her name is Kali Yuga. Before I even knew what Kali Yuga was, I got her on Easter, so death, burial, and rebirth after a heart attack, which I associated with my heart chakra opening, and it was just so fast and so shocking that it sent my ethereal body, which into a frenzy, because I couldn't handle the electricity overload. So, I mean, just everything that you've said and everything that's going on in my life, is absolutely awesome. I would love to share a new tattoo of the divine masculine and feminine within each other, because the second coming of Christ for me is within each and every one of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that all of this crap that the world is manifesting is just a result of our inequities and flaws and hatred and unworthiness that we've spewed within ourselves, ultimately going out into the universe. And I've been recently studying neuroscience and quantum physics, and you know, I am a product of all of the darkness. You know, in Romans 5:19 it says that for the disobedience of one man, many were made sinners. So by the obedience of one, whether that be a man or a woman, right, many shall be made righteous. So I had to be in the deepest, darkest depths of what life could offer for me to be able to come out into the light and gain the pearls of wisdom. So I'm in the middle of writing a book, which I would like to manifest, you know, by stating that with everyone here, the truths of my experiences, awakening to an era of love. So everything that you've said up this far is such a grand confirmation that even the lowliest of the lowest of the lowest is worthy of the love that the universe has to offer. And we are all so capable of letting go of all that which is not us, which is anything that's other than love. And I am living proof. So I have a new business that I'm trying to get off the ground, that I will, and that's all in alignment. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying all. I love what you said about the Christ being the marriage of the masculine and feminine within us, the great love and the great clarity coming together in noble commitment to put love into action. That is the Christ consciousness. That is the love consciousness. And Jesus lived that astounding life.
Yes, I had to suffer that to realize that, the loss of the love.
But there is no coming to it without suffering. You can't have it mentally. It has to be, it's installed in you through a breakdown of the old you, isn't it?
Right. It's that bliss. It's the great bliss. See, I found joy within, no matter the circumstances that are currently happening through my life, because I am not what is that. Maybe at one point I was, but I am now empowered. So I call that soul infused, bringing my higher self into this 3D aspect of what Gaia and everything has produced. You know, the earth has produced from its level of consciousness onto this plane of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And just create, like, I like to spark the Christ consciousness within everybody that I meet, so that I can assist them in healing themselves, because it's not for me to do. It's for me to, like, put the hand out there and help just you
to love, just
your
to
divinity.
Serve. Yes.
Your divinity, to step into that, because I've been, molested and raped and a drug addict. I mean, I could go on for hours, but I've also had the beauty of living on different continents, and I'm multilingual, and the victimhood didn't allow me to see the beauty of what my existence is. And just by being able to have a breath, that is the true beauty. And if I can affect change, like I did with myself, for others, that's even more beautiful. So what about everything else?
But the reality is that all the suffering you've been through prepares you in an amazing way to recognize the suffering of others. And now that you've found the bliss and the truth and of love, you know what pain people are in because you've been in it. So you can go and give yourself with joy to helping humbly so many people. That's
I do.
Isn't that wonderful?
It is. My cup overfloweth. That's my heart. I didn't know that, but I know now.
I just want to tell you something, which is to give you something, because it was a priceless gift to me, and I'd love to give it to you who loves the Christ. When my great teacher was dying, I was with him during his death process. And one night, and it was very painful and very beautiful, because he was one part of him was completely destroyed, but the other was more awake than ever. And I was actually sitting by his bedside during the night and holding his hand and tending to him. And suddenly, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, he was naked in his bed, and he just sat up, and he was seeing something come through the door. And I know from being there that he was seeing Jesus. He was seeing the Christ. He was seeing his beloved, the Christ, and mine too, actually. And he said these 4 words again and again and again that have become the motto for my life, and I'd love to give them to you. He said, serve the growing Christ. Serve the growing Christ. Serve the growing Christ. He just said it again and again and again and again. And what I understood at that moment is that we're serving the growing Christ in us so that we can come into the fullness of our real Christhood, whether it's male or female, gay or straight, doesn't matter a hell of beans. We're serving the growing Christ in each other by encouraging, inspiring each other. We're serving the growing Christ in the world, in society, in institutions, in politics, in economics, bringing a vision of sacred activism to create justice and harmony on every level. And in an even grander level, we're serving the Christification of the universe, the oneing of the universe, because if you look at the great work of Teilhard de Chardin, for example, and other great Christian and other kinds of evolutionary mystics, you see that this oneing of us is contagious. It ones increasingly all things so that the whole universe potentially will in the end re-meet its origin and become transfigured in that origin. So serve the growing Christ, my darling. You're doing a great job. Write that book.
Andrew?
Yes.
My name is Glenna Wiseman. I'm in California.
Hello.
Born in the City of Angels and in Northern California right now.
Oh, the City of Angels. Yeah, I'm actually a great fan of LA. I love LA.
My heart yearns for a recalibration of our language. My heart yearns for the Christ Sophia.
Yes.
My heart yearns for the oneing of and the release of the gender-specific words that we use that are encoded in our DNA. That
mine too. I love those words.
That it affects us on a level that we are unconscious to, most of us. And so when I read the great mystics that I've really dived into since 1991 in a situation where I was nearly perished in a plane, I've had many of these experiences, and I yearn for this. And I fell in love with you last Saturday in your consciousness. Scott, thank you so much for bringing that beautiful divine feminine event. And I knew I had to be here today.
It was wonderful, wasn't it? It was wonderful.
My heart is so grateful for the awakening, because without this awakening of the feminine, this birth will not happen.
No, because Mother is the birthing force. Of course she is. Yes.
So I'm putting that out there, my cry for this languaging to, particularly to people in places of influence like yourself. So I'm putting that out there. And then my question.
Well, I've spent my life, I mean, I don't know if you know my work, but I've written several books on the Mother. I've constantly cried out in the name of the Mother as a man who's been, I hope, very deeply transformed by the Mother, and who has done a lot of work to try and bring the sacred feminine to men and to women. I absolutely adore the Mother. The whole of my life is an adoration of the divine feminine. So And I
of
believe
course,
that
because you have the
Jesus
golden
loved
bloom
it.
behind you.
Yes.
It's awesome. So here's my question. As someone who works in a professional capacity in the solar and the clean energy space, I'm reminded often of Christian D. Larson's work in The Pathway of Roses, where he talks about weaving together the different worlds. So how do we take this knowingness into the realms of where we sit on the planet to act? How can we keep ourselves, because what we want to do is not do that work. We want to do this other work over here. But it's like
No. There's only
I know I need to keep on this path within the clean energy. I know I need and uplift other women and keep within the industry and keep doing what we're doing, because this work needs to be done in a very practical way.
Yes.
So it's how do we keep our vibration high? I'm struggling with how to ask the question, but how do we keep our vibration high as we do this work out in the world?
Well, that's what I'm going to be speaking about this afternoon. I'm going to be dedicating the whole afternoon to that. But there's only one real answer, and that is to make mystical practice the absolute core oxygen of your life. And the simplest way of doing that, I believe, is what Kabir said and what Jesus said, is basically to say the name of God always, always, always within the heart, to keep remembering who you really are, one with the one, through a mantra that you repeat silently. That is the way that the great masters in the last 150 years have taught. For example, Ramakrishna, the greatest Hindu master of the last 150 years in many ways, who discovered the unity of the religions and knew that we were in Kali Yuga. He said, in Kali Yuga, the most powerful practice is saying the name of God. Kabir said it, Jesus also said it. So it's been the unanimous testimony of the great mystical traditions, and I've followed it myself for 30 years. So wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, whether I'm walking to the post office or going about my day, I make sure that I keep up a river of remembrance. And you'll find that if you do, you'll constantly be expanded. You'll constantly be fed peace. You'll constantly be fed energy. You won't be annihilated by the demands of your work. They will, in fact, be infused with sacred wisdom through that simple practice. And the other key is to realize there is no separation between inner practice and outer action. Your outer action must become a form of prayer, a form of adoration. When Bede said, serve the growing Christ, he meant treat the waitress with the dignity she deserves. Speak to me to speak to you with the respect that you deserve. Whatever work you are doing can be secret prayer and secret adoration. So the inner and the outer become two expressions of the same reality of love in action. When you're breathing in strength through sacred practice, you breathe strength out by sacred action. So you live one undivided life. Don't divide sacred life from sacred action, and you'll come to understand that in both your deepest mystical practice and in your most practical, down-home, useful action, you are breathing the same reality. Then you come into what Jesus and other great mystics have called the undivided life. And everything you do becomes an expression of serving the birth of a new planet. From simple acts of courtesy and politeness and giving money to people at the side of the road who need it, to all of the projects that might be inspired by your divine inspiration that you do in the world. One of the reasons I love Scott is that whenever I have any interaction with Scott, and he's very efficient and he's organizing all kinds of extraordinary things like what we're doing right now, he's always the same person. He always brings a sweetness and a lucidity and a clarity and a courtesy and a kindness and a precision to whether he's asking you to do this and this and this, or whether he's simply speaking. He's the same being. That's what we're challenged to be. Does that make sense to you, Glenna?
Yes.
That's the reality. Don't make a separation between your inner mystical life and your outer action. There's only one life.
Thank you.
Andrew, hi.
Yes.
Hi, I have a couple comments and questions. I agree. These are ideas to enhance everything that's been said. It's like I am, you are, we are all the second Messiah already. We don't even have to try to get there. We already are whole and complete.
Yes, but you can say that, but realizing it in its fullest richness and depth is what is revealed to you on the real path. Because just saying it is not enough. Really coming to know what that truly means.
Right. At some point, we'll all walk on water and multiply food into, 1-2 fish and bread into lots and lots of.
Beginning, it's an inspiration, but then you've got to go on the path and go through the stages of the opening of the path to really understand. If you can say, for example, I am one with reality, and the difference between the way in which X will say it and the way in which the Dalai Lama will say it will be a quantum difference, because the Dalai Lama is living it in every breath and in his cells and with his words and with everything he is. And the other person is making a beautiful statement and may believe in it, but he hasn't, or she hasn't yet completely incarnated and embodied it.
Right. The embodied part is the main key, feeling the energy in the words, feeling the energy in our thoughts.
It's not just feeling. It isn't just feeling. It's also acting. You see,
well, it's being. It's knowing and being.
Right.
Like we're all, to me, God. In fact, I know for a fact, there is no need. All negative words in the dictionary can be deleted. I know that for a fact. Nobody's sick. That we can just say, I am, you are, we are, not healthy, unhealthy, extremely not healthy. Nobody's suffering. That's just extreme, ongoing unhappiness. That's all suffering is. Extremely long, prolonged unhappiness, unjoy. Words matter. Words matter.
I think that it's also important to understand that the dark is as holy as the light, because God is beyond both light and dark, just as God is beyond both what we call good and what we call evil.
But he's not. But one God cannot be both good and evil. That's my point. In the beginning, there was one creator who created one creation, and it was good, period. Good, not period, not good and bad. You can't have a bipolar.
It's not bipolar. It's only bipolar because we identify those things as that. They're both.
Speak for yourself. We didn't.
What I'd like to ask, because we've got several people who would like to share.
Of course, Scott.
But thank you very much for how you opened that up. This is a long discussion, and I'd love to have it with you privately, because there is, I think, another point of view which is very empowering too.
I've kind of set up a little queue of people who've wanted to ask questions, been very patient. So we're going to hear from Charlotte next, and then Suzanne, And if somebody else is wanting to get in the queue before we take our lunch break, just send me a message or raise your hand. And Charlotte, I'm adding you to the spotlight with Andrew.
Okay. Oh, hi.
Hey, Charlotte. Love to see
Hello.
you.
Thank you so much. Oh, my Mandelas. They're my favorite. The Mandelas.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, first of all, Scott and Deborah, for creating this beautiful opportunity and for everything you've done through Saturday Night Live. What an incredible community this has been and a gift of this pandemic. So thank you so much for that. And I just want to put it out there that I aspire, as I work through my own limiting beliefs as an artist, to really be a musician and share my gift of music, and someday maybe to be on your show and share music someday. So I'm just putting that out there.
Good for you. Go for it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and I am an artist by trade who ended up in the child welfare field, and I was a puppeteer teaching children how to empower themselves from physical and sexual abuse. And through that journey, it became a platform. And I now do equity work in the child welfare field with respect to.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah, so it's been an incredible journey and a way I've used my artistic gifts, although I've never, this is the ironic part of it, because these are oppressive institutions, right? But the ironic part is I really try to work with our staff across our province. I live in Canada. To help our clients to bring their whole selves into the interaction, and to allow staff to bring their whole selves into the workplace. But the irony is not lost on me that I'm still really learning to bring my whole self into the spaces. So, right? So I feel like that's my sacred journey. And the more I allow myself to do that, the more I help others to do the same, right? That's how we magnify. So I'm so thankful to you and to Saturday Night Alive, and what a gift this has been. So my question for you is just kind of a personal question, but also then a kind of a grander question. When you were speaking about the 3 days in the hotel, and on that second day of seeing all of those catastrophes, things that had come and still to come, which I can only imagine. I mean, it just, right? As an empathic person, I sometimes fear the suffering. But your words today have been very helpful and encouraging to that respect. But you talked about afterwards that you slept.
Yes.
And I'm just curious about, in your sleep, did you dream? Did you remember things?
I was so exhausted, but I woke up completely refreshed. It was, in a small way, it was like a crucifixion resurrection experience. I died in a way in my sleep, and I came a new person. I felt completely renewed the next day, as if one person had died and another was being born into this wholly new universe. Right. The same universe, but irradiated by divine light, taken into another level of presence.
Okay, that makes, because I guess you needed that rest at that point, right? Your soul needed that rest.
Yes.
Right, I can imagine. And that just sort of makes me wonder about your thoughts just on general in sleep and beliefs that sometimes we journey and do service and are different places in our sleep. So just inviting your thoughts and kind of teachings on that.
Well, 3 things. First of all, it's very important in this time to get as much good sleep as you can, because you need to rest your whole being to be able to stand the intensity of the pressure of this transformation. Secondly, I am a great believer in what the Hindus and Buddhists and Sufis know, which is that sleep is a place in which you can receive sometimes the highest teachings, because when you are asleep, your whole being is relaxed, you're not resisting, and very often the divine will send you tremendous visionary truths and revelations in sleep. So what I do before I sleep is always to ask God that if there's something I truly need to know, please, please make it available to me. And I find actually that I get more teachings in sleep all the time than I do even from the great mystics and from the teachers that I respect. Thirdly, if you go on a real mystical and psychoanalytic journey, if you're like, I went on a 11-year journey with a great Jungian psychoanalyst, and what he taught me slowly was the language of dreams, that Your dreams are places where you can get very deep insights into your shadow, for example, into what you're not learning about what you're doing. And through that process, I've learned how to listen to my dreams as very, very accurate representations of what I need to watch out for in my own actions, in my own attitudes, and in potentially some of the attitudes of the people around me. So the dreams can be a tremendous source of really pure information about what you need to know to be more aligned with your truth, and also can be a source of real protection, because very often I've had one vision of someone and in a dream I've been shown another side, which I haven't been alert to, but need to be alert to, not to protect myself and to protect the work I'm doing. So that's what I feel about dreams.
Okay.
That's just a small part of what I feel about dreams.
Right. Thank you. And I feel like there's so many questions I could ask, but mindful there are many other people. So thank you very much.
Question.
Thank you, Charlotte, for being mindful. And yeah, we're going to hear from two more people and then give Andrew a lunch break, give all of us a lunch break. So we're going to hear, I'm going to bring Suzanne up. And I'm just looking to find you here, and then we'll bring up Joyce. Then we'll take
lovely questions. I love these questions.
All right, there's Suzanne.
Hey, Andrew.
Susan, lovely to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. So my question is, what actions do you see that we can do right now on this planet to make a difference?
I'm going to be talking about that all this afternoon.
Okay.
But the most important question, and I want you to hear me on this, it's a very important question, what can we do? But the fundamental question is, what do we need to be? Because if you take action from a limited consciousness, it might do some good. If your action is born from a very much richer, more expanded consciousness, it will have a blessing in it, and it will be much more powerful. So when people say, what can I do? What can I do? They're in a way not, you have to start with the real question. Who do I have to be in a time like this to be able to act in ways that are really helpful? So that means you need to really plunge into a deep spiritual mystical path, to be transformed, to be guided, to act in ways you might not even have imagined acting, out of a new level of awareness, which will have much more impact on the situation than anything that your panic or your heartbreak could have suggested. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you, Suzanne?
Yes, yes, it does.
Because that's what Westerners always go to fix-it solutions. But that isn't going to work in a dark night experience, because part of what's being destroyed in this dark night is that fix-it mentality. We want to imagine that there are 5 things we can do right now to fix the dark night, but the dark night isn't going to be fixed except by people who have been through the dark night and been transformed by the dark night and infused with a wholly new level of consciousness, and then they'll be guided to act in ways they can't even yet imagine, with solutions they cannot even yet imagine. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So and I'm not criticizing you, it's a wonderful question, I feel your heart in it, but there's something much larger at stake. There's a great transformation going on, which is destined to bring birth a new kind of humanity. And the first and essential thing is to plunge into that transformation while keeping your heart open to action and starting to act from a wholly new level of awareness. That's what my vision of sacred activism is about. So that's what I'll be sharing with you this afternoon, so that I hope that I'll give you all kinds of tools and ways to start really imagining that new action. Because the old action, even the good-hearted old actions, are clearly not working. Something new has to come in. And it can only come in from another level of consciousness, because all the solutions we propose from our well-meaning consciousness will not work. The solutions that we enact from a much higher, deeper, richer level of consciousness will have a divine force behind them.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. Thank you so much.
It's very important. It's very transformative when you get it. And the beauty of your question, it shows me that you're ready for this next level. You care deeply, and that's wonderful. Thank you.
I would love to riff on that for a moment, Andrew, and then we'll hear from Joyce and take our lunch break. You know, you talked about how the 60s at one point were like another opportunity, and the Beatles were the music of the 60s. You know, they were the voice of the 60s in many ways. But there's one thing I wish they had done differently. Instead of it being all you need is love, I wish it had been do everything with love.
Yes.
Because that is what I'm hearing from you. It's not just taking the actions, but it's being the love. It's being the hope. It's
being love acting.
Yes. Yeah, being love in action. Exactly, exactly. And so, you know, there's a funny term which is called angry vegetarian syndrome. Right? You know, or the angry activist. And what I love about your activism is it's sacred activism. What was the name of your book? It was Hope.
Yes.
And so we have to do it all with love, not with anger, not with self-righteousness, that this is what we've got to do.
But love can be fierce. It has a ferocity about it. I mean, Greta Thunberg is a great sacred activist, and you must have seen that absolutely ferocious speech that she gave to the UN when she stood in front of the UN at 15, and she said, "You have asked me to come to talk to you about the environment. How dare you? What have you been doing all these years?" You have to have, love isn't just sentimental. Love is also ferocious. Love has both sides. So let's diminish the real rich power of love. Just as the mother isn't only nurturing and tender and generous and sweet and unifying, she is all of those things, but she also has a Kali aspect. She also destroys to create. She annihilates to restore. And divine ferocity is part of love's working, but it's got to be used by fierce, enlightened compassion. I have seen the Dalai Lama once, only once, get so angry I thought that I would die. Not at me, thank God, but to the group of people around him. And he just lacerated their stupidity, their sloth, their laziness, everything. And then he smiled. And what was perfect about it was that he was telling the total truth. They respected him enough to receive it, and everybody shifted, and it just happened. It was truth speaking, and it was over. So let's have a movement that isn't fierce as well, but let that ferocity always be in the service of deeper justice and greater harmony and more profound truth.
Let's just all take a breath and breathe that in. Thank you.
The whole point about the New Age is that it has been very, very unaware of that divine ferocity. There isn't a single great mystic prophet who hasn't been fierce as well. Look at Jesus. My God, Jesus was the tenderest and most loving of beings, but there were moments when he just rose in his majesty and said, "This has got to stop." All the great prophets have had
when he tore the temple apart, when they had turned. Right. I love that story.
But he was doing it not just to say this is madness. He was also doing it to liberate them. Because divine ferocity, if it can be received by people as an act of love, can actually liberate them from illusions that are trapping them. So you have to have that in your arsenal. And it isn't anger, it's ferocity, it's different. The truth is ferocious. The truth of the universe is ferocious. The truth of God has an awe-inspiring, majestic, terrifying side, as well as a loving, nourishing side. They're two aspects. And they're both intertwined. Let's stop this fantasy. Are you hearing me?
Boom. Absolutely.
I'm sick of it. I can't take it anymore. It's not.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Beautiful, Andrew.
It has to happen. We've got to get rid of this dreadful policing of people. We need sacred anger. We need sacred ferocity. We need Greta Thunberg raging at the UN. That was a holy moment. She didn't say, come, let's all get together and start. She said, what the hell have you been doing? How dare you sit there and hire me to tell you truths? You are men of power and women of power. You've had the power for years and you've done nothing.
I am going to semi-ferociously just remind us that we want to give Andrew a break. So,
I love you. I love you. I love you.
I love you too, Andrew.
This afternoon. God bless you.
Here's Joyce with our last question before the break.
Andrew.
Yes.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes. I'm with you all the way. Okay. And I see the gift of the dark night of the soul.
Yes, it's the greatest
and
of all.
I see the sadness and terror of it, yes, as well as the beauty, yes, of it, and the power and the depth of feeling,
yes,
and transformation spiritually. What I'm concerned about is that all around me, I see people who are just craving to get back to the old normal, to get back to something that's over.
Yes.
They are afraid of the dark night of the soul. Oh, it's too terrifying, right?
Yes.
So they're not even sort of putting their toe into the dark night of the soul. They're just craving to get back to something that is a nostalgia,
yes,
something that's over.
Yes.
And there's a lack of patience, yes, and there's so much confusion. And while we're here talking about all the wonderful things, and I'm participating by trying to contribute to uplift people socially, spiritually, Joyce, artistically.
Let me just say to you what we need to break, my darling, because that's a
okay,
and I'd love to talk, if you've got it, after what I've said, you need another question, I'd love to hear from you. Look, this is a dark night that is only just beginning. There are great and terrible catastrophes ahead. There will be no new normal. So people who are in denial now, people who are doing magical thinking now, they will have shattering opportunities to wake up very soon. The climate is collapsing. The economy is extremely fragile. Corona is far from over. There are other pandemics in the pipeline. Naturally, most people are terrified of the dark night. We all are. And very few people as yet have the strength to really allow the process to come through. But I swear to you something, that Kali is not going to relent. She is going to dance this terrible dance until either we get with the program or we die out. And why I am teaching in the way that I am teaching to the people who will listen is so that you and I can become aligned now with the deep truth of the birth, serve the birth, knowing that it may not work because the human race is unbelievably broken down by fake mysticism, by consumerism, by addiction, by greed, by tremendous laziness of spirit and tremendous sickness of spirit. That's what's happening. But we have the crazy doctor with her knife. And those of us who know what is going on have only one job, and that is to feel the dark night, be transformed by it, be born into our mission, perform that mission, flame out with the beauty of that mission, give everything again and again and again, and let the chips fall where they may. That's your duty, that's my duty, that's the duty of the lovers of God. We're not God. The human race may decide to commit suicide and matricide quite soon. But if you and I do that birthing work, who knows what could happen? Who knows how contagious wisdom can become? And who knows what people will be prepared to hear a few years down the road when there is so much more suffering even than there is now, and so much more death, because that is coming. Have a wonderful lunch.
Andrew, do you want to take any longer for lunch?
Oh, God, no. As long as I can have a blood transfusion, I'm fine. I've got one.
All right, so we're back at 1 o'clock, and I just want to encourage everybody during the lunch break to go to Andrew's store. It is andrewharvey.net, and on his store you can find the book, bonus talks to go along with it, all sorts of really good stuff. So this is a wonderful place for us to visit while we have our lunch. We'll see you all at 1 o'clock California time, 3 o'clock Central time. And we give thanks to Andrew for an amazing, how blessed we are to be receiving his transmission, and grateful that you're all here.
Scott, did you just say 1 p.m. California time? Because that would be 4 p.m.